Okay, so, well, I know that your last name is Holstein, but what is your maiden name?
Actually, I kept my maiden name, and it's Lee, L-E.
Okay.
And my first name is Phoon, so it's a very Vietnamese, it's a unisex, very popular name, just like John or Sue or Kathy. I mean, it's very common.
Mm-hmm.
Can be a boy or girl. So.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in central Iowa my whole life. I was born in Vietnam, but I was a baby when I came over to the United States. So I don't remember anything.
Okay.
I was 6 months old.
Have you ever been back?
I have been back once.
Okay.
After we got married, so in 2005, and actually Andy's been back more times than I have. He's taught a couple classes there, but I've only been back once.
Okay. What kind of job do you have currently?
I stay at home. I work at home. I take care of my kids, and so I'm at home with them.
Okay, yeah. Did you attend a college?
I went to University of Iowa for my undergraduate, and then I went to Illinois State for my graduate degree, and then after that, I went to culinary school at Kendall College.
Okay. Do you think that like the Vietnamese culture and community is adequately represented in our like American or the international like viewpoint?
I think the Asian culture in general, not as much.
As it should be.
We're not as maybe mainstream as a minority. Mm-hmm. There's bigger populations of other minorities.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
So they may not be as, I guess what did you say?
Like adequate.
Yes,
yeah.
Or noticed as much.
Mm-hmm.
There is, a lot of stereotypes
yes.
of like jobs or, your mathematician, brainiac, right. Asian culture, totally pushing their children to do more and to be better. There's certain pockets in the United States that are heavily populated in the Asian culture, and then there's some that are non-existent. Right. So it just kind of depends, I guess, on where you're at and how you look at things. But compared to other minorities, we're probably not as
well represented.
Right.
Okay. How do you think French influence in Vietnam impact the nation's culture? For example, the French cuisine that was brought over. Did your parents and grandparents start to cook French food at all, or did they kind of remain in traditional?
Yeah, there's a lot of crossover. There's a lot of foods that are definitely Vietnamese, and then there's a lot of foods that are definitely Vietnamese, but they've always been French Vietnamese. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to, at my age, it's hard to know how long ago it started. But for me growing up, I've always known it as certain things were always French Vietnamese. Okay. So I don't know any different. So like the bread, and the baguettes, it's even though you don't picture
in like Vietnam than
their baguettes are very similar to if you go to France. Mm-hmm. I've been to both places and they're very similar, and you can't really get bread the same here.
Right.
And the spices and I guess for example, there's a Vietnamese beef stew. Yes, beef stew is very popular in the United States, but we have beef stew in Vietnam, but it has a lot of take on the French culture.
Mm-hmm. Or, like how they would create that dish.
Right.
Yeah.
My father, when he went to elementary school, it was mandatory that he learn French. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of French influence of that. The way they dressed, the Catholic Church being present. My parents were Buddhist, but there was a lot of Catholic churches in Vietnam.
The pressure to...
Because of the French colonies. Yeah. French was mandatory. French, you had to learn French, speak it, write it. Mm-hmm. And my dad's family, before the war, or the earlier parts of the war, moved to Europe and France in the 60s. So
Like
to France and Belgium, to French-speaking countries.
okay.
So my dad's side, yes,
Yeah.
he
To find
he
like more
stayed
of a,
in Vietnam, but the rest of his family moved to Europe and the French-speaking countries
just to find like more of a opportunity or
to get away from the war.
okay,
And they knew
yeah,
and they knew
of course,
French.
yeah.
And
And obviously they have that French speaking
yeah, they had a connection.
background, yeah. So yeah, I guess that does make sense. How do you think that the colonization or especially the war that like broke out because of things that were changed like affected the Vietnamese people? Like at the time they may have been like maybe ashamed of their identity even, but has that like been alleviated with time?
I guess if you look at any country, I mean, besides Vietnam, any country that comes over to take part and settle,
Right.
they're sort of influencing the original people that live there with, their way of
Their
living.
ideals and everything
Their
that
talk,
they
their
think is
the way they speak,
right.
the way they dress, or even the way they eat. Gradually, it does change how, I guess, certain people
like an
live,
outlook
and they
on-
adapt.
right.
But for when they left Vietnam, I guess I don't know if they had a true. There are certain groups that wanted to be just strictly Vietnamese, and some really appreciated the French.
And like what they had done for them.
Had what they bringing over a new sense of a way of life.
Right.
And then when they left, and then there's China, and China was connected to Russia, and the whole pressure of communism. So then you have another group that was trying to instilling on what they're supposed to believe.
Right.
So
Yeah, I guess they've never been free from that.
right. So there's always
For,
somebody that's
Hundreds
always
of years.
been
Uh-huh.
trying to rule or tell them what to do or how to speak or how to live their life. So, and you find that in other countries too. But when I go back, it's a little bit different because they're very modern now.
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
I haven't been back in a while, but my mother goes back maybe every 3 or 4 years, and everything's very modern. The younger generation is very hip. They listen to, whatever kids are listening to here.
Right.
They all have, they're all updated on their technology. So it's hard for me to say now
right.
what it's
yeah.
like.
It's kind of like assimilated all into
Right.
like
But I know for my father, growing up, I mean, it was a huge influence on him because he had to talk, speak. Everything was 50-50 Vietnamese and French. So he had to be bilingual in that. English was maybe third.
okay, yeah. So just to have that
Right.
as a backup. Is there any like cultural experiences that might have been altered by the European influence a little since like from their original inception? Like maybe did your grandparents at all like tell you, oh, this was different like before, like in the early 20th century or the early 20th century or around then?
I really didn't know my grandparents very well because my dad's mother and father died during the war.
Oh, okay.
Or pre-war. My mother's father died in the war. He was in the army for the South Vietnamese. So I do have one grandmother that's still alive, my mother's side, but I don't really ask her these questions.
I understand.
But I mean, I think when I went over there in 2005, it was definitely a culture of trying to be a modern culture.
Like in line with some of the culture over here,
But it's still a very poor country, but they do have certain influences. Like, you see, like, certain French influences of, like, the companies, like, Chanel and
Like
other high-end boutiques.
like
that
even
would-
though this country, obviously some of the people are not so well off. There's
No,
still
they're
these,
very
like,
poor.
There's
very-
still these like very
right.
high end brands that have
Right.
like made their
And there's a lot
presence
of
known.
and there's a lot of clothing,
Like
material things that are made over there.
Yeah.
But you also see, if you go to certain shopping districts and hotels and restaurants, they still have a lot of French influences, even in their name, even their decor,
Their language. It's
even their high-end boutiques selling some of the French culture of the high-end handbags or sunglasses.
right.
So there's still, I think that maybe it's just always carried over
Right. Yeah.
from
Like there's just even though
20, 30, 50 years ago.
right, even though there's not this like physical connection anymore, obviously it's still very closely culturally
Right.
related. Okay, I think that's all the time I
Okay.
needed you for. Thank
Great.
you very much.
Yeah. Anything else? If you have anything else, just give me a call and
All right.
we can
Okay.
I can elaborate more.